Garden Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Trevor Cochrane. I'm joining you all the way from Madrid, of all places in the world. We are continuing our journey filming what is a really quite remarkable part of the world as part of the Explore TV series. And I've got some fantastic material we're going to bring back, and along the way we've done a little bit of stuff with the gardens here too. It's a really interesting part of the world. Today's show, of course, is not about what I'm doing. It's all about how your garden's going, and we've got a lot of I suppose great garden information. Last week I didn't quite get to all of your questions, so the goal is to catch up on some of those from last week, and of course to be answering your questions this week, and they are starting to come in already thick and fast. So good morning to you from Spain. I know it's afternoon. I believe it's actually quite wet in WA, and in Melbourne very, very cold. And we will be catching up a bit later this morning. In fact, I think we'll do it as quickly as we can with Rowan, my good mate out at Garden Express. And of course, last week we talked about kangaroo paws, and I've got a funny feeling there won't be any left, but we've got something even more exciting for you this week, which I think you will love. And I also want to make sure just that when you send your questions in, please tell me where you are, what state you're in, and what city you're in. It makes the world of difference to basically how things are going. Good news for my garden by the looks. Samantha Sheffield's told me that the sun's out in Kalamunda, which is fantastic. I am missing it. I believe it's looking spectacular, and I'm planning to be home next week to be able to get back into the garden and enjoy it a whole lot. Now, shall we? I reckon first up, I think Shaylee's going to press a button and Rowan is going to appear on the screen magically. There he is. G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you? How's everybody?
Good. The rumour's true that it's pretty cold in Melbourne today.
It is. It's bitterly cold, very icy. I've got the heater on in the office, which is good, but outside very, very cold.
One day I think we should do a little behind the scenes thing, and everybody will start to get an understanding as to what's actually going on. So just outside of Rowan's door is a buzzing hive of people who are packing orders that are being sent all over Australia with all sorts of different plants. Yeah. And around the corner from that is a whole bunch of machines that are packing bulbs. Yes. And then around the corner from that's the nursery where all the plants that are being sold are all sitting waiting to be picked up. And somewhere in amongst all of that, Chloe Van Berkel is covered in soil and grime and didn't want to sit in front of the camera today. Is that how it worked?
That's exactly how it works. She's been up in the warehouse packing today. So, we all try to get out and do a little bit of everything. So Chloe, I think she may have forgotten that she was going to come on today. When she got her head in, she was covered in dirt, and she said, "There's no way I'm going on the show."
She would have been so much more credible too. But anyway, that's just how it goes, Rowan. We get your pretty face instead.
Can't be helped.
Hey, listen, last week we talked kangaroo paws, and obviously it's those amazing new varieties out of Kings Park. I've been sharing a few photos of some of the breeding that Digby's done, and I went back and just had a look at some of the insights on the number of people that were looking at those photos, and it's in the tens of thousands of people. And then I had a look at the next one in the list, and in the tens of thousands is the other breeding program Digby's doing, and it's the incredible Grevillea breeding program.
It's amazing, isn't it? I think, as I said the other week, Chloe and I had a bit of chance to spend some time with Digby, as I know you have. It's just amazing. Showed us through all the labs, and then how they're doing it all, and it's an incredible story, right in your backyard, which is even better.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, WA is pretty famous from the point of view of its West Australian natives. It is considered, one of the world's top 5 biodiversity hotspots for a very good reason. And grevilleas are a really good example of some of the plants that grow really well in the West. And I suppose, keeping it into context, these are plants, as a general comment, that love hot, dry conditions. But of course, Digby's taken the best of some of the species from all across Australia to create these new amazing grevillea varieties. Do you want to talk through some of the ones that you've got?
So we've got another collection similar to what we did with the kangaroo paw the other week, where we put together 5 of his mixed colours, basically, so as a starter pack for people, again in 50ml tubes, so it really is a good starter. These ones are things like it includes Outback Sunrise. I think that one that we're seeing there might be Coral Red. That's included in the collection. Spirit of Anzac and Pink.
That's it there. That's just a sensational grevillea. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and Pink Profusion, which is a beautiful. That's the one there that you see.
There it is. Yeah.
Flowers all year round, which is some of the things that Digby and his team have been able to achieve, which is absolutely incredible.
That's probably the single biggest thing. So with a lot of the grevillea varieties that we love, we might get 2 or 3 months of flower out of them, but not all year round. And Digby's been doing that breeding to ensure that people can enjoy those flowers all year round. It's even more important when you think about providing a really good food supply and safe habitat for native birds and bees. So they've got a constant food supply when these plants are growing near them.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I think people probably don't think of grevilleas too much as that companion plant. Like, to plant a few grevilleas around your veggie garden, and you're going to get those friendly pollinators come in and do what they're there to do. So, they're very versatile. I mean, other than being beautiful in their own right, they're perfect for companion planting and pollinating.
In a way, you raise a really good point, and I was spending a fair bit of time last week in Portugal, and I had that reminder of visiting a vineyard anywhere in Australia, and you'll see the big long lines of the grapes, and at the very front of that row will be a rose bush. And rose bushes, they use them for a very important reason, and that's as an indicator, obviously, for disease. But in the case of grevilleas, it makes an awful lot of sense to maybe have a grevillea certainly at the front or the back of a row of vegetables, because it's going to attract all those pollinators in, and birds which eat the insects that we don't want around as well.
That's it, exactly right. When you're talking about roses and wineries and people being at the front of the row, I thought you were going to throw out Dave's name there for a minute, because he's always at the front of the row when it comes to winery.
Well, look, and he is a bit of a rose in his own right, but no, we'll leave poor Dave, who can't defend himself. I mean, we've had a shot at Chloe. Look, I think there's a really important thing to add to that, and that is that the whole Garden Express business is a family. You're all family. All your staff, if they're not bloodline, they're certainly taken in as family, and it's a family business, which is a really lovely thing. These grevilleas, getting your hands on them is a big deal at the moment. They're very, very hard to get hold of at the best of times, and you've got them in small starter tubes, haven't you?
Yeah, so the collection comes in small starter tubes. You'll get that collection of 5. It's 25% off, so $34, sorry, for 5 plants. But we've also got 140ml pots. So if you're looking for something a little bit more established in your garden, we've got most of those varieties in 140s. So that's just a little bit bigger, gives you a little bit more instant gratitude, if you like. But they're just as beautiful.
Well, the thing with these new varieties coming from Kings Park is they are very difficult to get your hands on. So you're talking 5 in.
Sorry, particularly over here, Trev, some of these varieties we haven't had over here before, or not at Garden Express anyway. So for anyone on the East Coast, some of these varieties you may not have seen or heard of before.
Yeah, and I think a couple of little growing tips for people. Grevilleas do best when they're in full sun. There is absolutely no doubt about it, but they will grow in semi-shade. They do prefer at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. So if that was a morning or afternoon sun, then that makes them an ideal plant to have. They do love free draining soils, and if you are in a heavy soil environment, grow them in pots. It was one of the big bits of advice that Digby gave me on site when I was filming that story, was to say that, look, don't be scared to grow grevilleas in pots. Don't be scared to prune grevilleas on a regular basis. It just makes a more compact plant, and it obviously triggers more flowering. So a little bit of advice there with regards to them. And of course, they are one of those plants that has an adapted root system. So they are sensitive to phosphorus, and using native plant foods is the ideal scenario. So, whether it be Osmocote or Troforte or any of those sorts of things, always look for the one that's designed for natives, and that'll get the very best results out of those plants.
And that goes for potting mix too. So if you are putting them in a pot, make sure you use a native potting mix, not a potting mix, because obviously it is low in the phosphorus.
Yeah, mate, it's another great deal from you guys. I think $34 for 5 grevilleas. That's 5 grevilleas for the average backyard would be absolutely sensational. But $34 delivered direct to your door. It's what Garden Express do, and people can shop 24/7. It's available all from the comfort of your armchair, basically.
It sure is. Just jump onto the website. There's a banner on the homepage as usual, straight through to the deal. Like Trevor mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, those kangaroo paw that we had a week or two ago, they were gone. Soon as it, straight after the live show, but as soon as it went to air, pretty much all gone. So guys, you're getting a sneak peek here. If you're interested in these grevilleas, get in now, because once it goes to air tomorrow afternoon, they're not going to last long. They never do.
Now, Rowan, each week normally I say, would you put some to one side for me? And I was a bit slow with that last week with Chloe, but I don't have to ask that because I've actually got these varieties growing in my garden. I know how good they are. They are sensational. And as you mentioned, one of the major objectives with the breeding of these was to get prolific flowering all year round, and they do that. But come springtime, the amount of flower that's produced on some of these varieties, and I think Pink Profusion and Spirit of Anzac in particular in my garden, there is so much flower on them that you can barely see the foliage. They are just a flower machine.
And the size of the blooms too. Like you're getting sort of 10 to 15 mil flowers on some of these, which is crazy for really
enormous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just the beginning. So the great work that Digby and the team at Kings Park and Botanic Gardens are doing in the breeding of these varieties, it's about to expand even further. There's a lot of new varieties that we were able to see a few weeks ago when I was filming. Yeah. And it's an exciting future, but just keep adding them to the garden because they're great for the local wildlife in particular. Mate, just stress it one more time. There's one chance, I reckon, it's probably today. I think they'll be gone by tomorrow. gardenexpress.com.au.
Yep, that's right. 5 grevilleas, 50 mil pots, sent out to you, direct to your door. Get them in the garden, attract those friendly pollinators. You won't regret it.
Well done, Rowan. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, mate. It's always great to catch up. Fantastic work. He's such a lovely man, and they do such a great job, Garden Express. And as I think I mentioned midway through that, the thing I love about working with these guys is they're a family business. They really care about what they're doing. I know that deal is so good because when Shaylee says, I've got to stop sending information through to you, I've got to place my order with Rowan now before they're all gone. It must be pretty good, Shaylee. Get into it while you can. I'm going to get into your questions straight away because I know that we've got a lot to do and we have 45 minutes of answering your questions. So let's go to Tina Rennick at Listerfield in Victoria. Send us through some photos, and she's got a large driveway, and I am looking at this, and despite the fall of the land enabling the rainwater to travel into the storm drain, and despite drainage being further improved, it's not doing too well. I'm trying to work out what you've got there. I'm trying to work out what it is that you've got growing there. Comprising of Lilydale toppings. I'm not sure what Lilydale toppings are. But it's the green moss, I think, that's causing the issue for you. And You've done a couple of things here. You've tried to kill it with copper sulfate to no avail with Slasher, which it seems to thrive on, which is odd because Slasher is pretty darn effective. But obviously it's not taking care of this. It is moss. Thanks very much. That's very good. That's Yak. Good on you, mate. Thanks for joining us. I'm just having a look through that. It looks like it really does need probably some manual clearing, to be quite honest. The good thing about moss, there's two things you should know about moss. Moss converts more carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it in the ground than pretty much any other plant. So from the point of view of moss gardens, a lot of people are killed to have that problem. Obviously, it's no good if you've got a drainage issue. And that's where copper sulfate typically would actually take moss out if it's in high enough concentrations. What you're probably going to have to do is to look at one of those pelargonic acid impact sprays. I'm not quite sure why it's not working, except for the fact that it's possibly that there's moisture, a lot of moisture in there, which is diluting it. And two, at this time of the year, you may just find that it's just a bit slow because it has been so cold. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Let me do a little bit more homework and I'll come back because obviously the moss is a bit of a different one. It's not something that we would normally get there. So we're probably going to have to think that through just a little bit more. If you've got any suggestions, if you've had moss and you're struggling to get control of it, then maybe you've got some advice. Obviously, the other thing you should do, and you should think about seriously, is making sure that you're forking the ground. And what I mean by that is aerating the ground. So getting a garden fork out and just walking around, popping a little bit of, probably ideally gypsum, into the holes that you've forked into the ground will help improve the drainage and the structure. And if you can get the drainage working super well, moss should typically disappear, especially when you get full sunlight. But sometimes what happens is you're in shady spots, and that's where moss will do really, really well. Okay, maybe not a good start from my point of view. You kind of got me with that one, I think. Glenn Miller, hello, mate. Glenn's up in Queensland. Oh, let's have a bit of a look here. Okay, so you've got a Tiburtina, and Tiburtinas are a beautiful plant. They are absolutely gorgeous. They do have a bit of a habit of getting a bit leggy, and that's what you're showing us here. You've got one that's 2.5 metres in height. It looks like it's probably Alstonville, one of those varieties that very stretched out. And to be quite honest, and you're asking about pruning, these plants have the most magnificent blue flowers, pink flowers. There are a couple of more compact forms that have got white flowers, but it's the blue purple that is just a knockout when it comes to these guys. But they do require pruning, and you can prune this. So it's about 2.5 metres in height now. I would be very comfortable with you taking a clean ½ metre off the whole lot, off the top, but maintain the shape. And what will happen is it'll burst out new growth. Now, as soon as you take that old growth off, you should feed the ground. The ground's fairly warm in Queensland at the moment as it is. Things are growing quite strongly. You'll support very quick recovery, and that's what you want. As that growth comes out, if you've taken ½ metre off, you're at 2 metres. So now you're at an area where you can actually reach it and prune it. Once it starts to flush out some new growth, and you've probably got something like 10 to 15 centimetres or so of growth, take another 5 centimetres off. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to create another double bud growth from those cuts. So you'll find this whole thing will just turn a dark green foliage. You won't be able to see through it the way you are at the moment, Glenn. So it's a twofold process with regards to getting on top of that. So I wouldn't do much more than prune and feed at this point. And it'll look fantastic up there on the Gold Coast, of course. That's where you guys are, and we really appreciate you supporting us every week with some great questions. I'm just rolling through. Samantha Sheffield has sent through a question. It's a good question, but Sam, you haven't told me where you're from. And this particular question relates to roses. I have roses, which I love, and I want to know what can be grown in between the bushes to stop weeds and cover the ground. Typically, you are a lot better to be putting a very good. Oh, you're in Kalamunda, Sam. Thank you. Typically, and this is what I use. I actually just use a big, long, thick layer of sheep manure. And when I say thick, I'm talking about 100 mils or so. And while sheep manure can have some weed seeds in it, and later on it can actually be a good base for some other weeds to get in, a simple top up of that sheep manure as it sort of compacts down will make the world of difference. One thing I would say to you is there's the local RSL, the Scouts once a month sell it by the big bulk bags there. It's about, off the top of my head, I think about 14 or 15 bucks a bag. Best value ever. It's fantastic. And it's better than a living. I should mention why I'm not recommending a plant here. Typically, I would recommend a plant, but one of the downsides to roses is high humidity. If you put shrubs in there and affect the flow of air through those plants, or you raise the humidity because you've got a ground cover running across the bottom of the ground under them, if you do not have very good spacing between the roses, you'll start ending up with some significant problems with regards to fungal diseases, black spots, powdery mildew. Those things are really quite a significant problem. It's so good to have so many people joining us. We've got people coming in from all over the place, which is fantastic, and saying hello first up, which is really lovely. And we've certainly got a good contingent coming out of WA, but we've also got people coming and joining us from places like King Island. So Teshin, I hope I got Teshin, yeah. I hope I got that right, Tesh. Fantastic to have you join us from King Island, one of my favourite island destinations in Australia. I had the pleasure of going there many years ago to have a look at Seasol, their production facility there. And oh my goodness, what a beautiful place, and how good are the cheeses. Wow, heaven on earth. All right, let me keep rolling through because we do have these questions and they are flying in thick and fast. Marsha Blake, you're in Harvey in WA. It's another great part of the world. What are some great climbing plants you would suggest to put underneath fruit trees or hibiscus? Now, I'm not sure why you would want to put a climbing plant underneath a fruit tree or hibiscus, because it's going to climb into that tree. Now, if it's a spreading plant, probably not so bad, but certainly I wouldn't be recommending any climbing plants to go under them, because they're just going to grow into those trees and they'll affect them. They'll set them back. So please don't do that. If you're talking about ground covers, there's a whole bunch that are suitable, but there's some really lovely edible ones, and one that would grow really well in Harvey. It's a little bit different as far as thinking goes, but if you've got fruit trees, why don't you think about growing cranberries? Now, cranberries are a fabulous ground cover. They produce berries in the late autumn, and what would happen in places like Canada is they would literally raise the water level in the area where they're growing, and the berries float to the surface and they just scoop the berries off. It's an amazing thing to see in real life. But in Australia, where we don't have that much water to do that, and we certainly don't want to see water rising, all you do is you go through and you pick the berries. But they do make a great ground cover. They make a fantastic hanging basket for those of you out there that might think about that. Okay, I've just got a little bit of clarification too before I go to the next question, and it's just with Glenn Miller. The actual Tibushina is 4 meters. Sounds to me like you want to bring it back to 2 meters. You're probably pushing it a little bit. I'd be comfortable with maybe 3, but anything more than that, you might be cutting into hardwood, Glenn. And when you cut too far and when there's no foliage left, sometimes they'll bounce back. Every once in a while, they just give up the ghost. They literally don't push out any more new growth, which would be really problematic. Hi, Wendy Fox. G'day it's good to have Bris Vegas joining us. It's fantastic. And Rick Di Francesco, thanks very much. Hello, good to see you. Let's keep rolling along with answering all of your questions all the way from Madrid here in Spain, where it is really, really hot. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Madrid. I'll answer a couple more questions, and I'll just tell you some of the challenges that they're having in this part of the world as well. Vignette Ainsberg, you join us every week. You are so loyal, and I really love answering your questions. You must have a beautiful garden. I want to come out and see it at some point. You're in Balladura in WA. You've got a fig and a guava in large pots. When can I prune them and how heavily, please? Well, I wouldn't prune the fig at the moment, but I would prune the guava. And it depends on what type of guava too. So again, you can have the Hawaiian guava varieties like the white Indian or the beautiful pink-fleshed fruit. That's always a fantastic one. They can be pruned, but you don't prune them too hard. Then you've got the cherry guavas. Now they can be pruned however you want. In fact, on my last journey to Norfolk Island, I had the pleasure of actually spending some time in some really lovely gardens, and one of them had a guava hedge. It was magnificent. And when you think of lily pillies making a great hedge, well, guava is the same family and produces the most amazing, crops of fruit at exactly the same time, to the point where a lot of it ends up on the ground and all the birds are getting into it, which I've got no problem with. But of course, it leaves you with an endless supply of guava jam if you want to cook it up, which is what we did with ours at home this year, as my shrubs are getting quite large. But don't be scared to prune either one of them. But the figs, wait until the figs are finished fruiting. Vignette. Remember, fig fruit is actually just a flower, believe it or not. So when it opens, you'll see all the little stamens inside the fruit. That's what we eat. That's what's sweet. It's actually a really interesting flower. In fact, it's multiple flowers inside, which is even more remarkable. But you don't want to cut that wood off because you don't want to lose the fruit. That's why I'm telling you not to do it at the moment. Okay, here we go. I forgot about YouTube. Each week we're, of course, going live via YouTube as well. And PTG Benny, you're on YouTube. You're in Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. What a great part of the world. My lily pillies are struggling with black sooty mold. Tried eco oil. Is neem oil something you would recommend? Do you know what? It's when you apply it that makes the difference. Now, the black sooty mold isn't actually the problem. The problem's the scale that's inside those plants. And that's why normally eco oil would be fantastic. What I would suggest you do, and don't be scared to do this, but combination every second week for about maybe 2 months. So, you're talking, 4 applications. Get your spray wand inside the plant. You need to spray up into the foliage because often that scale's underneath the leaf. It's sitting under there, and on the stems. And so if you get in and you're spraying on the inside and you get all that eco oil covering over the top, it will do a good job. Neem oil, not probably quite as effective on scale as it is on some other insects. It is obviously a nice natural thing, but yeah. Sorry, I reckon you just need to persevere. It's really important. Vinette, you just said pink-fleshed, prune lightly. Don't prune too hard. I do love that guava. I've got one at home that a really good friend of mine gave me, and it's been struggling along because it's a little bit in the wrong spot. It's in a shady spot, but it is doing okay. I tend to prune mine lightly, and it's just getting to the point where it's about to produce some sensational fruit. And I love the pink flesh guava. When in Asia, whenever I'm up in Singapore, one of the treats for me is the sensational pink guava juice, which you'll get at breakfast every morning in the buffet. And I've been guilty of knocking back more than one glass of that in the morning because it is just delicious. All right, let me stop talking about food. I did a food story last night here in Madrid. It was a street food tour. We literally went from restaurant to restaurant, and there is so much amazing food in Spain. This is the Iberian Peninsula is absolutely incredible. One of the interesting things, I don't know if anybody's been to Madrid, please put your hand up. Say, I've been to Madrid. I kind of had it's landlocked. It's at least 3.5 hours from the ocean. So it's more in the centre north of Spain. Very, very nice part of the world. Really, really lovely. Interestingly enough, big problem with climate change here. So the temperature peaked yesterday here at 37 degrees Celsius at 7 p.m. in the evening. So gives you an idea how late it is getting hot here. And I think I told you last week in Portugal, one of the wineries we'd been to had a 52 degree day. these are temperatures that are really scary, and they're seeing dramatic change now in the landscape. So plants that used to survive here quite well are now disappearing, which is really scary. So they're doing all sorts of things. But Madrid city is a green haven. In fact, Madrid is an Arabic word, and it means springs, water springs. So all over the city, there's natural springs pop up. So there's obviously a good groundwater supply for plants. And the trees, the city is covered in trees. There are trees everywhere you go, and it cools the place. And so when you're in the city, you're actually in a cooler spot than you are necessarily in the countryside, which is almost counterintuitive to what we deal with in Australia. So most cities in the world have a problem with superheating because of the amount of concrete that they've got. Well, in this particular instance, lots of concrete, but lots of trees shading it, creating a humid, cooler environment in the city for the residents to enjoy. And it is a beautiful part of the world. Certainly you'll get to see it on Explore TV. Coming up on Channel 9, probably the end of July. I don't have the exact dates, but we will let you know because, there's a lot of nice things to see. Now, as I waffle on here, you keep sending me lots and lots of questions, like Tiana Kelly. Hello, Tiana. You're in Brisbane, and you very kindly sent me some photographs. Okay, there's 3 of them. The top one is an orchid. That's the moth orchid, the Phalaenopsis. The bottom left-hand of screen is an Echeveria, and on the right-hand side, you've got a Syngonium. And the orchids are beginning to go, do I need to do anything in particular with your orchid? If it's reasonably cool outside, Tiana, put your orchid outside. I would take that one dead leaf off. I can see there's a bit of a burn in it. And the one on the opposite side, I'd take that off. I would give it a little bit of liquid fertilizer, but a flower promoting one. There is a Thrive for flowers, and I'd certainly look at that. That would be ideal over the foliage. And you could probably do that once every week for about 4 weeks. I mentioned get it outside, and the reason I'm suggesting that is if you've got a spot that's doesn't get too hot, over say 25 degrees during the day, but it gets cool at night, it's the cold that will trigger the flowering. Now here's my big cheat for the day. If you don't have those cold conditions, if you could give it an ice block every night for the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks, it'll produce a flower spike. It's a little trick I just learned recently, and it works really, really well. And all we're doing here is manipulating Mother Nature. So you can chill down those roots. It's the soil temperature that'll trigger that flowering process. So, and you want the soil temperature to be sort of under 20, probably about 12 to 14 degrees ideally, which one ice block will probably do that and keep it quite cool during the majority of the day before you chill it back down again. The Echeveria, which is your succulent below, I could be wrong, but I reckon that needs to go into a smaller pot, and I would suggest that maybe that potting mix might not be a cacti and succulent potting mix. It looks a little too rich and organic for me. I'm not saying that they can't get by with it, but one trick with succulents is to make sure they're in full sun, they get a little bit of feed, and they do like being root bound. So, you could grow into that, but it looks to me like the other thing you could do with that is you could add some competition, so some additional plants to go around the outside, other succulents, which might look quite lovely too, by the way, and you'll end up with a multi-planter that just looks fantastic. But that competition between roots tends to stimulate growth between the plants. It just picks them up. And last but not least, of course, a controlled release fertilizer. And the last one there on the right-hand side is your Syngonium. And you're saying about it's got white spots, white fungus. I think that one has got mealybug by the looks of it. It could be just scarring on the leaves. I'm not sure. But look out under the leaves or in the forks or crevices of the plant where the leaves come from, that what we call the axils, and that we're in that axil sort of joint there, you'll find that there might be some fluffy, what looks like a whitish sort of fluff insect sitting in there. Now, if you're seeing that, that is mealybug, and mealybug does need to be treated, and it needs to be treated with something that is systemic. There are a few different systemic insecticides available in your local garden centre, and you probably just need to go in and talk to them about what it is that they've got available, because they've all got very different application rates and the products. Some of them are quite what am I thinking about? They literally come in a little tiny tube that only need a little drop, so quite concentrated. That's the word. Gee whiz. It is early in the morning over here. It's only just turned 7 o'clock, or 7:05 here in Madrid. And of course, you guys are just about at wine time on a Friday, about to go into a great weekend. And that's fantastic. Now, I'll keep answering your question because there's more coming through. Shaylee sent one through from Alana Demich in Gawler in South Australia, another great part of the world. Pretty good rose growers out at Gawler way. How do I save my poor orange tree? Let's have a look. Ooh, you've got a very thick rind going on there. That's a really interesting thing. That tends to be caused, and you can see there's even what we call a mechanical stress rot sitting inside that plant. And that's a really good indicator of a plant that's under severe stress. That rind tends to be very thick around the outside, and it gets thicker to protect the seed on the inside. And unfortunately, that comes at the rind and the pith. The white is the pith, and that's designed to insulate the inside to allow the seed to get through and actually survive. And it would suggest that you're not mulching enough around the base, and that you need to increase the water to your plant. But that may or may not be possible. I don't know, but certainly increasing a big thick layer of mulch will help. And I would give it a feed as well. I don't think that'll hurt. Stimulate that tree. It does look like a poor orange tree, Alana. Would you do me one favour and just have a look at the stems? If you're seeing any growth, any of the branches that are growing that have got long spikes on them, come back and let us know, because that's not dissimilar to the fruit flesh look of the rootstock of the orange as well. So it may be possible that something's growing through there. I'm getting to hurry along. Shaylee saying Cheryl Rowe is in Witchcliffe in WA, beautiful spot in the southwest of WA. Lily pilly hedge that looks like it's covered in salt. Never seen it before. Don't think it's mealybug. It's not. It's a plant it's an insect called white waxy scale. And you're probably if you're seeing the white on the leaves, that's the babies as they're developing, and you're probably seeing some quite bigger ones on the stems. The best thing to do, and the most effective thing to do, is to be treating them with a good oil, and eco oil is a great example. Pest oil is another one, and white oil is another one. All of them do the same thing. They literally, if you can get a really good coating, so it means you've got to get the spray wand inside, and you've got to drench that plant on the outside and the inside of the foliage. So you're really getting in. Really interesting thing with that is if you do it, it suffocates the scale. The scale can't move and get away from it, so it suffocates it and it dies. Now, some people look at it and they can still see the scale and they start going, oh, it didn't kill it. It didn't do the job that I thought it would do. Don't panic. That's not a problem. What's actually going on here is it suffocated it. You've got the shell of the scale, which will remain, but the scale itself on the inside, not a problem. It's dead. It's gone. So, Cheryl, I hope that helps. That's a good way to get rid of it. Certainly, we'll clean it up pretty quickly. It's not mealybug. It's scale. Linda McFarlane, hello. Oh, yes, I do know where you are. When laying turf in Sydney on compacted soil, would it be good to use sea salt wetting agent and aerate the soil a bit, then topsoil and turf? Okay. If you've got a heavy compacted soil, you need to break that soil up. The way to do it is either get a fork into it to really sort of get some depth, and you want to push that garden fork. I know it's hard work, but basically what you're doing is coring the ground. Then get yourself some gypsum, and you want to apply gypsum at the rate of 1 kilo per square metre. Wash that into the holes, and what it'll do is it'll go down, and it just improves the structure of the soil. It opens it up. Then put a layer of probably a nice clean sand, so something that's really clean on top of that. Then you put your turf on top. Then you get a plate compactor, and you just go over the turf to make sure that the roots are embedded in the sand. Give it a good water, Water it probably once a day, depending on how warm it is. If it's quite warm, maybe twice a day for a week, then once a day for the following week, once a day for the following week, and after that, probably every second day. And by the time you get into summer properly, you probably only need to water twice a week, depending on how extreme the weather is. And remember, one of the biggest problems with plants is actually watering too much. Putting too much water in does a lot of different things. Makes it more vulnerable to fungal diseases and also bacterial diseases. It also, interestingly enough, flushes all the nutrients away from the roots. So you can end up with this sort of quite soft, bouncy lawn that ends up getting very thatchy, and that's only because it's getting way too much water. So it depends on the turf you're using, but there's my advice. And the reason why I haven't said anything about the sea soil wetting agent is it's probably wetting agents are designed to make sure that water is moving through the soil that is dry evenly. If it's nice and moist, you don't need to do anything. If it's compacted, you definitely do need to open it up and adding that gypsum. I do talk about gypsum a lot. Calcium's very important for soil health and soil structure. And gypsum is pH neutral, so that it sits right in the middle of the scale, so you're not going to make your soil more alkaline if you're applying it in the same way that you would with something like, say, garden lime or even dolomite. So, okay, let's keep rolling along. You're very welcome, Linda. It's great to get feedback as we're rolling. Kerry is from Rollystone. Now, that is in Western Australia. It's up in the hills, a little bit of a gravelly kind of soil. Kerry, my beetroot is really healthy looking from the top, but the fruit is really small. Is there something I can feed to promote the fruit? Okay, so you're really talking about the root here. And interestingly enough, it's where phosphorus comes in. So NPK, those three key nutrients, when you're feeding with a higher P, with root vegetables, and a higher K, so the combination of those two, you tend to get better results. Now, there is a really good potato fertilizer that comes from a company called David Gray, which I think you can only get in WA. You might be able to get it nationally. It's called Potato E-Manure. And I think there's another version of it on the East Coast. I just can't remember exactly who it is that sells it. But it's, again, a root promoting fertilizer. It's what you want to use for all your root veggies. And just on root veggies, you're probably thinking about planting out your veggie patch at the moment. If you had a patch where you grew tomatoes last year, or capsicum or chili, and you've taken those plants out, hopefully you've rested the soil over winter. If you haven't and you've been growing something else in there, that's fine. But now is the time to be putting a a root promoting fertilizer in, turning that soil over, adding some calcium in the form of garden lime, dolomite, or gypsum is another option, really mixing it all up, and then plant root vegetables into that. That's my tip for you. Into the patch where you had tomatoes, you go root vegetables, parsnips, carrots, any of those, radishes, particularly this time of the year, they'll all go really well in that environment. And in a patch where you didn't have tomatoes, that's where you need to grow your tomatoes this year. You have to rest the soil from tomatoes, really important. Okay, hopefully that helps, and particularly beetroot, it will make a big difference. Kerry, just leave those beetroot in the ground. Don't go pulling them out. If the foliage is healthy, harvest the foliage and throw it into your salads. That will actually encourage, that it highlights something to me which I didn't mention. But take some foliage off, use it in salads, first thing. Second thing is, check the fertilizer you've used. Because if you've used a high nitrogen fertilizer, it'll produce lots and lots of growth, which actually sounds like what's going on here. So maybe the answer to the question is actually make sure you're not using a high N fertilizer. NPK, you don't want anything over about 8% if you can help it. So hopefully that helps. Excuse me. Let's have a look here. Daniel Ledbetter, how are you? What weed and feed can I use with a dog? All right. Okay, we've got the 15-minute mark, Shaylee's just told me. You can use any weed and feed with a dog, but what you've got to do is make sure you keep the dog off the lawn for 24 hours after you've applied it. It's really important. It will be drawn in through the foliage of the weeds and wash into the lawn. But I would apply it, leave it for 24 hours in dry conditions, keep the dog inside, take it for a walk, but don't leave it to run around on the lawn. And then the next day, I would maybe just give the lawn a quick wash down with a hose and then let the dog out there, because all the stuff that needed to happen has happened and the dog won't come in contact with anything, so it should be fine. Let's keep rolling along. Sandra Minjut Becerra. I hope I got that right. Considering I'm in Spain, your last name sounds very Spanish to me, Sandra. I could be wrong. Hello from Wattle Grove in WA, not far from where I live in the west. Beautiful. Can I spread sheep manure on both citrus and natives before mulching? All right, natives, no. Citrus, absolutely yes. What you don't want with manures and native plants is they can cause a burn, even sheep manure, which is probably one of the safest. Sheep and horse are probably the two safest you can get, but don't put the sheep manure around your natives. Exotics love it. The topsoil loves it for anything that's edible, but it's not good necessarily for native plants. Just use a chunky mulch around your natives. They don't need a lot of work done on the soil, but they do need the occasional feed. Talisha, hello, you sent me a photograph. This is great. Let's have a look, folks. We'll share it. I wanted to know if my worm castings are ready to scoop out. Still a newbie to having a worm farm. Let's have a bit of a look here. I think Shaylee's moving madly trying to make this thing. Oh no, she's just told me ignore that one. She's forgot the photo. There you go. Technology. Sorry, Shaylee. Look, you will know when your worm castings are ready to go, because there's a layer of them and it's very, very obvious as to what they are. It's completely converted organic matter. So maybe we don't need to see the picture. Sorry, Shaylee. Christina Nassar, you're in Brisbane. Hello, my daughter and partner with their two young daughters have just bought a house near Ipswich, Brisbane. Well, congratulations on that. That's fantastic. I was wondering if anyone could help me get their garden looking great. It's non-existing at the moment. Recommend some. Well, there's some pretty good garden centres up in Brisbane, and my first stop with any garden would be, particularly, wherever you are, you want to go to the local garden centre who understands the conditions that you're growing in. There's a great one up there called Eden Gardens. Now, it just depends where you're located. So I'm not quite sure where they are in relationship to Ipswich, but look, it doesn't matter. I mean, go and stick your head in your local garden centre and have a chat to them. Do a few little things. When you go in, take a little soil sample and put it in a glass jar, because the key to any great garden lies in the soil. And if they say, look, we want native plants, then you might not need to do a lot to the soil, but that's where you'll get the right advice. Okay, let's have a look here. Deborah Stanley, hello. Hi, could I please ask the name of the mushroom for memory that you had on your show this past weekend? How cool was that little mushroom story? We had so much feedback from that. And there's a lot of different mushrooms now available, exotic mushrooms, and they unlike the button mushrooms, which require dark, these ones all love the light. And the lion's mane is one of them, and it's got incredible health benefits. There's a lot of research being done with regards to memory, and I must be having enough of it, because I tend to remember a lot of my Latin names and my botanicals, and obviously the advice I'm sharing with you. So I probably need to stick with it at this stage in life. But it's lion's mane mushroom, and you can jump online. I think maybe through Facebook might be the best way to do it, actually, and have a look at the work that the guys do. David Proudmore and Bridge there. They do a whole range of these, and I think it's called Swan Valley Gourmet Mushrooms. Swan Valley Exotic Mushrooms. Anyway, Google or pull them up on your Facebook and you'll find them in there. Swan Valley Gourmet Mushrooms. Absolutely delicious mushrooms. They sell them in kits, which is why I mention it, because they can send them basically ready, the spore set up, ready to go. By the time it gets there, all you have to do is just cut some little holes in the plastic bag, keep the moisture up to them, and they'll deliver you at least 2 crops. They're fantastic. So Deborah Stanley, lion's mane mushroom, just one of the many. Let's go. Jubru Pritchard, how are you? What can I spray to kill sting beetles? Starting in August. I'm not sure what a sting beetle is, Jubru. I might need to do a little bit of research. maybe if you can give us a little bit more information. That one's definitely got me. Rick D. Francesco. Hello, Rick. I have some Vanda orchids and the roots are getting quite long now. Can I cut back the roots? Will it hurt them? No, it won't hurt them. I would only cut them back if they're getting really untidy or if there's a problem with them. Vanda orchids are just the best. If you love moth orchids, Vanda orchids, folks, are just sensational. Rick, you're very lucky to have them. And they produce aerial roots. So just to let you know, they literally sit, they don't need soil. And they'll put these aerial roots down. They have the capability of drawing moisture out of the air. So good, so good, so impressive. Linda McFarlane, here we go, in laying turf in Sydney. Oh, we answered this one, Shaylee. We've already done that one. So that's the wrong one out, I think. I think I meant to go to another one. So we'll have a look at that. Wendy Fox, you're from Brisbane. Getting a lot from Brisbane today. So hello to everybody in Vegas. That's fantastic. Wendy Fox, zucchini plants of white mold on the leaves. How do we treat it, please? Yes. Okay. So some zucchini varieties actually have a white on the immature leaves, and as they mature, it tends to disappear a bit. But they do actually have white thing. It looks like it could be white mold. Powdery mildew is the actual technical description. What I would say to you is that if you do have white mold on your zucchinis, go and get yourself 2 litres of whole milk. I know it sounds like the strangest thing ever to say. I'm not recommending a chemical or anything else. Just go and get 2 litres of whole milk. Pop it in a little hand sprayer and mist it over the foliage of the leaves. And what you will find is that the bacteria in the milk will eat the fungus. So it'll actually take control of the white mold. Mold tends to the powdery mildew only tends to occur as a consequence of a couple of things occurring. One is high humidity and 2 is poor ventilation. So trick with zucchinis is to plant them apart, remembering they do actually get quite large and they're incredibly productive. So give them as much ventilation as you can and your fungal diseases will be at a minimum. Okay, let's go to Rita. Rita Mackay, just having a look here. You're in Corrine in WA. I've got Aquadulce broad beans in autumn this year. They're starting to flower. Do I pinch off the tops? First time growing these, you can pinch off the tops and all the goodness will go into those broad beans and they will come on quicker. And this is about the best time of the year to be doing it. So you certainly can. You can also pinch off the flowers. Some people do actually now add broad bean flowers to salads, etc. So you've got multiple choices there. But one of the things that it will do is it'll stop it growing up, which means all the energy will go into all the flowers that are below, which will produce those broad beans that you know and love. So hopefully that helps. Niall Sherwood, hello, you join us each week. Niall, thank you so much. How to stop mangoes falling before maturity in Pottsville. Consistency in soil moisture levels is the key, Niall. So mulching the ground, a nice thick layer, quite a sort of, you don't want a chunky mulch for this one. You want quite a thick mulch. So even a compost will do the job. Really important that you get moisture consistency. Mangoes will drop their fruit, as will avocados, as will anything else, if the soil's drying out. So that's a little bit of advice. And Wendy Fox, milk, who would have thought? Well, I'll tell you what, give it a go, it works. But it's got to be whole milk. You don't want anything, and ideally, if you could get your hands on it, milk that hasn't been homogenized, so that's boiled and all the bacteria taken out of it, because there's lots of good bacteria in there as well as some baddies that we don't want. But for garden use, perfect. Maybe do a little bit of a search online. You will find it. Nikki Roberts, hello. My young custard apple tree is looking pretty sad. The leaves are turning yellow, some brown on them. You're in Perth. How can I give it a boost? Guess what, Nikki? My Rolinias and soursop trees are very unhappy in Perth at the moment, and that's because we've had some frosts. It is a natural thing for custard apples to go semi-deciduous this time of the year and lose a whole bunch of foliage, and then put a whole bunch on as the new weather comes in. So if it's a custard apple, might not be a problem at all. But what I would recommend you do, regardless, is feed them. In fact, folks, if I'm going to tell you to do anything this weekend, is go out and buy yourself a few big tubs of fertilizer and feed your garden. As the weather warms, particularly in the cooler states, plants are desperate for that nutrient, and they will grow super fast if it's available for them. So, right fertilizer for the right spot. Obviously, native plants, you want a native plant fertilizer. Edible plants, you want a fertilizer that's going to promote fruit and flower. And for general garden, obviously a general all-purpose fertilizer. But this weekend, if you get out and give them all a really good feed, the next few months will be very pleasurable, very, very pleasurable. I think maybe Shaylee, make a note, and I'll take some photos week after next, and we'll show you a bit of a slideshow of my garden just for something a little bit different. You can have a look. My feeding regimes are very high because I do garden intensively. I do produce a lot of plants, produce a lot of fruit, and a lot of flower, and I want that to continue, and the only way that'll continue is by continuing the supply of nutrients to the plant. That's really important. Okay, Diana Marinelli, you're from Mickleham in Victoria. Just having a look here. I've got a 3 triple trunk bungalow palms, and the leaves are turning yellow. The tips are brown. Do I need to give them some magnesium or more water? This is all due to cold weather, Diana. That's not really a fertilizer. Excuse me. It's not really fertilizer. It's more just they just don't like really severe cold. So that's the suggestion that I would have for you at the moment. All right. You also have some Kintia palms that are turning brown. Not a good sign. It's indication that you've had a frost. That's really what's going on here. The palms don't like it, but they should bounce back. A little bit of sea salt over the foliage won't hurt them, that's for sure. That always helps. Let's keep rolling along. You do have some more questions sitting in here. We have 3 minutes to go, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut it short today because I'm traveling out to a place called Toledo, which is a 2,000-year-old town with quite a fascinating history, to do a story out there this morning. So I will be cutting it short. So if we do miss your questions, don't worry. We'll be back next week, and I promise I will answer them. I did have somebody very grumpy with us about not answering their question last week, and I ended up just going and just taking a look at that. But please don't get grumpy. We do our very best to help out, but we have day jobs too, and it does tie us up a little bit. All right, here we go. 5-minute mark. Greg Hines, Wellington, New South Wales. How do you make an orange tree out of a grapefruit tree? Can you show me? Well, the only way you can do that is to effectively kill your orange tree by cutting off the top plant, getting some growth out of that, then grafting a grapefruit onto that. And you can graft. Often it's done as budding with citrus. So you literally, with a knife, take the bud off your grapefruit, and you'll put a T in, lift the bark off, wedge that in, and tape around the outside. Sounds easy, doesn't it? It's not quite as easy as that, but it's certainly one way to do it. And now's about the time to do it. If you're talking about a double graft, you can actually cut part of you have to cut it back all the way, but you can cut part of your grapefruit off and then graft into one half of the grapefruit. It is possible, but it's not the easiest of things to do. Maybe it's something we should do on the Garden Gurus at some point in the future. I'll have a think about that, see what we can do. I think Shaylee's come up with a great idea. Perhaps we should do a longer live session next week. And I'd be more than open to that, because next week I'm going to be in Marrakesh, which is in Morocco. So I'm looking forward to that. I've got a few days there. Now, I am going to answer one or two new two questions, I think we'll do. So Irene Fraser, you're in Bundaberg, subtropical Queensland, lovely part of the world. I haven't been up for a long time, but I do love it. I think I went to the expo up there many, many years ago. I was so excited last week when I found the Masquerade kangaroo paw in our local Big Green Shed hardware store. Today, another variety, Carnival, came in. So excited, and I admit I bought more than one of each. Please, please, please give me your advice for keeping them alive during our quite humid summer here. I'd be happy if I can just keep one alive. Trick is, don't pack them, grow them in pots, firstly. Number one thing, grow them in pots. They do so well on pots. You want a free draining native potting mix to go in. you do need to feed them. So again, native fertilizer, critically important. The bit that's really also important is put them in a sunny spot, okay, and make sure you've got good free drainage around the outside. Really critical to make sure the drainage is really good. Airflow is really good around these plants. If you've got them up against other plants, you don't get air movement through, and they become susceptible to ink spot disease, which you don't want. These are bred not to have it, but they will get it, particularly in tropical environments if you're not careful. Wow. We have gone through a lot of questions, and you can probably tell by the sound of my voice, it's starting to go. I need to go and get a coffee. We're at 7:30 here in Madrid, and I think it is time to wind up for the day. Didn't really mention at the beginning of this, but we do have of course, a Garden Express $50 voucher for the best question. And I think maybe the best question was maybe the last question. I think Irene Fraser came through because I think that this is a really important thing. Grow these plants in pots. They really do incredibly well. That's the first thing. So keep that in mind. Next week, we'll also we'll have another $50 gift voucher. Plus, we'll have a $250 Troforte fertilizer pack for you. But that'll be next week. If there are any questions you've got, don't hesitate to send them in through the week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Gabby, just to let you know, I'm not on holidays. A lot of people say, oh, what a great life you've got traveling. Travel can be a little bit taxing at times, but we do have the great fortune of being able to work in some pretty amazing parts of the world. And I look forward to sharing those with you a little bit further down the line. Of course, don't forget, we've got the Garden Gurus on Channel 9 tomorrow. Check your local guides. It has been playing in Sydney and in Brisbane on 9 Life at exactly the same time as it plays on the main channel everywhere else in the country, which should be at 4:30 p.m, I think, I'm pretty sure. But check your guides. Always handy to do that. And of course, if you want to catch up on any of the programs that we put to air, always a good thing to do is to go to Channel 9's 9 Now. It's free to watch these things when you want to watch it. A lot of you now watch the Garden Gurus when you want to watch it via that particular app. It's a really handy thing. Thank you very much, Christine, Kerry, Irene, Gabby, Rick, Christine, Rita, and Irene again. Thank you so much. I hope that my questions or your questions have been answered and my answers have been much appreciated. And I think we'll go with just this little thing that we all know about, and that's how we can't resist ourselves. Irene actually bought 8 masquerade and 3 carnival kangaroo paws. No wonder you wanted to know how to keep them looking good. Grow them in pots. Thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next week. Oh, and one last thing. Don't forget those grevilleas from Garden Express. There won't be a second chance. I promise you they are spectacular and they will not last. I'm Trevor Cochrane. I'll see you again soon for another great session of live or on the Garden Gurus tomorrow on Channel 9.